In this video, I'll take an in-depth look at importing some DXF files, cleaning them up, and creating parts, adding toolpaths, and then we'll also get into doing nesting in follow-up video here, but we'll start with, first of all, importing DXF files. If you go to the IGEMS menu, you've got your open menu, and you can either open a file or import it. If you do open and you select multiple files, it'll open each file in its own workspace. If you do import, it'll bring your selected files into the same workspace. So for example, if I go to open and I select all these, here on the right we see that it's opened 6 tabs, one for each file. I'll just close those. And if instead I do import and I select them all, it's going to bring all of these into the same workspace, and then we've got this prompt here. If you choose automatic placement, IGEMS will decide where to put the drawing on the screen, and then the gap is the gap that it's going to put between the different files. Of course, later we can nest parts together, so you can set this gap to whatever's convenient to work with. If you choose manual placement, then you'll left click for each file as far as where you want it on your screen. And if you choose insert file name, it'll take the name of the DWG or DXF file and allow you to put it onto the part, so when you create the part, it'll use that name as the name of the part. We'll do automatic placement first, and we'll insert file name. Now this is where sometimes first-time users get a little bit confused as far as what's being asked of them. Click on OK, and first it prompts us down here in the lower left-hand corner, specify height. People often miss this. This will be for the height of the text that IGEMS is going to put on the part. You can either type in a number if you know approximately how big the part is and how big you want your text to be, or if you don't know that, you can left click, and if I move my mouse up a little bit and left click again, it's going to use the Y distance between those two mouse clicks to determine the size of the text that's going to put here. For each of those parts, it's going to put the name of the file in the lower left hand corner. Now, depending on the part configuration, when you go to create the part, IGEMS may or may not pick up the name of the part. If it's, say for example, a circle, and this isn't actually on the part, when you go to create the part, it may not pick up this text as the name of the part. So if there's any doubt about that, you can click onto the text. Down here in the lower left hand corner, there's a blue grip. You can just left click on that, and I've got my ortho on. I'm going to turn my ortho off for a moment here. I can just left click and move that and make sure that it's on the part. I think the other ones should be fine. Now, something like this where there's 2 parts within the same drawing, you may choose to copy this text up and maybe give this one a slightly different name since they're technically different parts. So I'm just going to do my copy shortcut, Shift-C, and base point, I'll hit enter, and I will left click up here somewhere, and I'm going to double click on that text, and I will just call this one B. And I'll double click on this one and I'll call this one A. As you can see in this box, you can also do things like change the text height if you want to. Now, looking at something like this, we've got 3 drawings that look remarkably similar. One of the features when you go to create parts is that IGEMS will look at drawings, and if it sees drawings that are identical, it'll condense it down into one and adjust the part quantities. So if these parts are identical, when we go to create this, IGEMS will make 1 part and adjust the quantity to 3. Let's go ahead, I'm going to copy this up. I'm just going to put this on each of these just in case they are slightly different. There could be a very slight difference in hole diameter or hole placement. Generally good practice in the next step to analyze and see if you've got any issues in your drawing. Could be duplicated lines, lines that aren't quite matched up, things like that, that when you go to create your part will cause the part geometries not to be recognized correctly. And what I mean by that is if I go to my Cam tab and click on Create Right Now. Now technically these parts are different thicknesses. For right now I'm going to go with the 063, but later we can go ahead and we can separate these out into different workspaces for their different thicknesses. But just to show what can happen if there are errors, and I select all those, hit enter, and in the preview window here we see that there's something going on with these two parts in the middle. And a handy tool to check to see what might be going on and clean things up is on your Tools tab. We've got the Analyze and the Cleanup feature. First of all, Analyze, if I click on that, this will basically look at the drawing and look for potential gaps, duplicated lines, things like that could cause issues. So sometimes it's going to be lines on top of lines, circles on top of circles, lines that don't quite match up. So here we've got a line that should have been trimmed up. This Analyze button is a toggle. Click on it once, it'll turn those yellow and red X's on if there's issues, and if you click on it again, it'll turn them off. I usually like to turn them off before doing the cleanup. Over here on the left, we got the cleanup tool, and when you start this, down in the lower left hand corner, prompts us specify tolerance. This is the cleanup tolerance. If you leave it at 0, it's only going to remove duplicated entities. If there are two circles that are identical on top of each other, or multiple lines on top of each other that are identical, it'll clean those up, but it's not going to close up any gaps. I usually like starting at 0 and then go from there. We'll just hit enter, left click, drag a box around here, left click, enter, and down here in the bottom shows us 1123 entities before, 909 after. If we click on the Analyze button again, we'll see that we have far fewer red and yellow X's. Now would probably be a good time to zoom in on some of these and see if we need to clean things up further. If I zoom in here, what we've got is, looks like they want to do stitch cutting around here to leave this knockout. We'll leave that the way it is. If we look over here, line that needs to be trimmed up. You've got two options on something like this, CAD and trim. You can click on that, get rid of that. So that's one option. Hit escape to get my trim command. If I click on there on the line, when it's highlighted like that, if I click on that blue grip, since my end snap is on, when that end snap shows up there, I can left click and move that point down there. Let's zoom extents here. We'll come back and do the Analyze once I think I've got things cleaned up. Zoom in up here. Again, I can either do the trim or click on the blue grip and move it to there. Here we've just got a random leftover line, so we'll go ahead and select that and delete that. Just highlight it and hit your delete key on your keyboard. Here we've got some crosshair for the circle centers. You can delete those or you can leave those. IGEMS will only put toolpaths on something like this if we specifically tell it, which we'll show you here on those little knockouts that we saw earlier. And then down here, again, something else that needs to be trimmed up. I'll use the trim this time, see how that works. And as a little note, down here, one of the options on the trim is the backspace key for undo. If you accidentally click too many times, you can hit your backspace key and it'll bring you back. Up here I'll show you a quick filter option. I can select those by left clicking and dragging a right to left box like that. However, if there's a lot of them, not that these are a lot, but if there were more, I can go to my delete command, E, shortcut for delete, and if I right click, quick filter down here at the bottom, and in here you can filter things out or specifically filter for particular things based on different selections here. In this case, I want to select lines, and if there were different lengths of lines, you can also specify minimum and maximum lengths for lines that you want to select, and also radii if you're trying to select arcs or circles. Can also select by color, layer, and so on. I think a line should suffice for what we're doing here. Click OK. And if I drag a box like this now, it's only going to find those lines. I can zoom in here. You see it selected the lines. Hit enter, and those are deleted. Let's go back and refresh our Analyze. So back to our Tools tab, Analyze to toggle it off and back on. And the only red X's we have are on these circles where we'll be doing the stitch cutting. So that's good. Let's turn off the Analyze again. Okay, let's go ahead and try to create parts. Go to our Cam tab and create, select objects, enter. Now what you might not be able to see in the preview here, if I click on OK first of all, is it didn't recognize these as being something that were supposed to be cut. Also, as a quick side note, over here, because I had the auto quantity box checked, it reduced those 3 pieces down to 1, but we'll come back to that. I'm just going to do an undo here. Why didn't it allow us to do anything with these geometries here? Even though we did the Analyze and there was no issues. Again, Analyze just to double check, yeah, no issues there. If we click on here, this is a block. Whereas if I click on this circle, of course it only selects that circle. Click on that, just selects that. If I click on here, it's selecting all these entities. These are blocks. In order for IGEMS to recognize these, we have to explode these. I'll just go ahead and select, and then I'll do my explode, which is X is the shortcut, or here on your CAD tab. So now that's its own separate thing. And let's go back and create parts again. Drag a box, hit enter, and here in the preview we see that we've got those now, and we'll click on OK. So that's good. However, over here we want to be able to add toolpaths to this, and with the quick cut command that we'll do here later, we'll want to define these as being other objects, which will then allow us to add toolpaths to that. So let's take that back again, Control Z again, create, select everything, hit enter. Over here you've got this other objects button, and this is what you use to let IGEMS know that you want to do something, be it marking or cutting, with open entities such as lines or arcs or segments that we have in this drawing. Click on other objects, select objects. I'm gonna select like this, enter, and then while we're here, this is that auto quantity box where it's looking at these 3 parts and seeing that they're identical and reducing it down to 1. If you don't want to do that, you can uncheck that box, and then you'll end up with 3 of these. So I'm going to leave this checked for right now. The other thing to note up here is this use text as name box. When this is checked, then if there is text on the part, it's going to use that as the name of the part. If there's no text on the part, then it's going to use the next number in the sequence here for the part name, which you can always change later. Click OK. And now we've got one of these, and we've got these pink lines here, pink arcs here that we can now add a toolpath to. If I double click on the part, it'll bring up this part properties box. It shows me the name of the part, which you can change if you want to, and then quantity. If I double click on one of these other ones, quantity's 1. And let's do a Control Z again just to show you some other things. If I had not put this text on the part, and we create. I'm just going to do Control A to select all, enter, do the other objects again. Click OK. Because this text was not on that part, if I double click on it, then that's the part name. If I want to change it, I can double click on here, Control C, copy, OK, double click on here, paste it in. Do another undo. So I'll show a couple other options in that create part box. Create, Control A, select all, enter. In this area, you have the option to add these parts into a parts organizer, a parts database, if you want to be able to track parts that you've cut. If you got repetitive parts, you can put them into the parts database and pull them out later. That will be an entirely separate video. Down here in the Toolpath area, geometry optimization. Basically, you're telling IGEMS the largest that you're going to potentially let the stream grow to, and it's going to look at whatever diameter that you type in here for your stream width and determine whether the stream can get into a particular geometry. And what I mean by that, I'll just do a little sketch up here. It's not drawn to scale, but if you had something like this, and let's say this circle represented your 40 thousandths stream width, with the geometry optimization turned on, IGEMS is going to look at that maximum tool diameter and determine how far down into a geometry like this that the stream can go before it starts digging into your part. If you turn off the geometry optimization, it'll basically go down to somewhere around here probably. With the geometry optimization turned on, it's going to stop such that it doesn't potentially cut into the part. So usually you want to leave geometry optimization turned on. Sometimes when you get artwork, there'll be times when you may find it better to turn that off. But for the most part, leave that on. That's geometry optimization. If there are tight geometries in the part that you want to get into, you can reduce this number. However, you cannot reduce it below whatever your maximum tool diameter is in your machine settings. If you do, you'll get a message like that. And that maximum tool diameter setting, if we hit cancel, cam tab, select, you can go into your machine settings, and in the pull down here, geometry. So that's going to be the maximum tool diameter. So if you want to be able to get into smaller details, you can reduce this down. Probably don't want to reduce it down below your nominal tool diameter, but there may be situations where you may actually have to do that, or just turn off the geometry optimization. Now when I go to create, that's going to be my default geometry optimization. Next thing here is curve fit. This is another one that you'll generally leave on. If you bring in a file that was digitized and had thousands of points, it's going to use a curve fit command to fit a smooth curve through those points, minimizing the number of points that are in your files. So usually a good idea to keep that on. Create toolpath. If you want IGEMS to add the toolpath, when you click on the OK button, you can check this box. If you want to add your toolpath later, you can uncheck it. We're going to leave that unchecked for right now. We'll probably save that for another video. Down here, you've got your default settings for quality for outside cuts, inside cuts, and other objects. On the little slit cuts that we'll be doing around here, That's the quality that it'll apply to those. Script area, you can have certain scripts written to happen when parts are created. If you think you have a need for that, you can contact me. I can let you know if I can help you out with that. And let's do our other objects again. This time I'm just going to select all that. Now I selected the text also. When I hit enter, you can see the pink text highlighted there. You don't have to add a toolpath, so if you inadvertently select other objects and you don't want to put a toolpath on there, you don't have to. And we'll click OK, and we've got our parts again. Now, one benefit about selecting the text like I did there this time is that that text will stay with this part. If I select that part and, for example, do my M shortcut for move, as I move the part around, that text stays with the part. That means when I nest this, I'll be able to distinguish that part based on the part name that's on there. Whereas on these other parts, this text is not actually connected to the part. As we saw earlier, it did use that for the name of the part, but when we go to nest this, it's just going to look like this on the nest, so sometimes it can be a little bit hard to distinguish one part from another if they're very similar. If you want part text on the part, and you get to this point and realize, ooh, maybe I should have done that, two options. You can backtrack here. You can either add this text as an other object at this point, or the part submenu, you have this option, add other objects, or you can use this part text option, which will be do a similar thing. I'll show you both of these. This can also come in handy if you get to this point and realize you forgot to select something you wanted to cut. If there had been a line in here that we wanted to cut, but I forgot to select the other objects, and you get to this point, you don't necessarily have to go back and explode the part and recreate it. You can, on the Cam tab, Parts submenu, use Add Other Objects. Prompts us select objects. I'll do that on this one here. And then it prompts you select part, what part you want to add that other object to. And now that text and that line that we're going to cut are connected to the part. The other option is Parts submenu Part Text. It's going to prompt you select parts. I'll select those. Enter. Prompts you down here, specify height. Again, this will be the height of the text that's going to put on here. You can either type in a number or left click and then move up a little bit and left click. It'll use that as the height of the text. Part counter, hit no for that since we're going to be using the text that's on here versus indexing a counter. So we'll say no to that. Add as other object. If you might want to do marking or cutting of whatever text, say yes to that. If you know that you're not going to want to, you can just put no. So just enter, enter, enter. And now we've got that on there. If I move that part, the pink text stays with the part. One other setting that I should touch on related to importing files is this setting that lets IGEMS know whether the files you're bringing in are in inches or metric, or you can have IGEMS ask you if you work with both formats. If you go up to your IGEMS menu and preferences, and then preferences on the general tab, there's this setting here, unit list drawings contains. I've got mine set to imperial since I generally work in inches. You can choose metric. You can choose ask, and it'll ask you each time you bring in a DXF file or DWG file what format it's in. Or you can do same as units, and it'll assume based on what units you have selected down here that it's the same. So I'm going to put this on imperial where it was, and I'm going to go and import a metric DXF file. And IGEMS has some on, go into program files x86 under this res folder. IGEMS has some sample files. These are all in millimeters, I know, but if somebody sends you a file and you assume it's in inches, but it's actually millimeters, we'll click on open. And this time I'm going to do manual placement, just because we didn't do that yet. We'll insert file name, click on OK, specify point. So as you can see here, we can see right now that this part is quite large. However, if this were the only file you're taking in, you wouldn't have a reference to know how big this part is. So specify point. I'm going to left click, specify height. Again, this is the height of the text that I'm going to put on this part. Left click, and left click. If I didn't know how big this was, I can use, of course I can go to my CAD tab, but I can either use the distance command and measure a couple points, and I see that this is, in this case, 120 inches across by 80, which is a bit large. You can also do your, hit escape here, you can also do your smart dimension. You've got two options at this point. You could either import it again and switch to the ask option, or we could scale this down. If I want to scale it down, I can go to my transform submenu, scale, select objects, enter, base point. I'm going to click down here, specify new distance. So I just start typing on my keyboard, 1 divided by 25.4, hit enter, and that'll be scaled down now to the correct size in inches. So the other option is you'd go back into preferences and either switch this to millimeters or metric or ask. If I do ask, import, let's take this one. So now each time I bring in a file, it's going to ask me what format it's drawn in. I'll tell it metric. Prompts me to specify point, left click, height of my text. In this case, again, I'll left click and move up a little bit, and left click and click that on there. It's probably a good point to take a break on this video. In the next video, we'll take a look at adding our toolpaths to these parts.